everyone. Thanks for being here, and welcome to another episode of Cookie Pocket. Today we are discussing, as previewed last time, The Last of Sheila, a detective, well, not really detective, but a murder mystery film that I stumbled upon a while ago and added to my watch list because its writers are Anthony Perkins, the star of Psycho, Norman Bates, and Stephen Sondheim, most known for his musical theater compositions and lyrics for West Side Story. And I see in this Skype video. We're not a sponsor of Skype. In this video call,
we use Skype. We can say that. Zoom is too expensive.
Yeah, sponsor us, Skype. In this video call, I see a fourth person, and I would like to ask that person to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Orly. I am a friend of Christian's from Kenyon. I am a rising junior at UNC Chapel Hill, and I only lightly dabble in movies ever. I love a good feel-good movie, but I don't really like conflict, and I'm very emotional, so I often don't watch many movies. But this was a fun one, so I'm excited to be here.
Thank you for joining us.
Very nice.
This is a valuable perspective because we've had, film students and self-styled filmmakers and people who watch things for fun to everything in between. So we like hearing those perspectives. And I don't know. This is not really what I expected. And looking at my list and knowing your preferences to some extent, Orly, I was trying to pick something a little bit more watered down, and there were moments in here that were a little more bloody and exciting than I expected. So apologies. Here we are, The Last of Sheila. Well, I gave this a 3 out of 5 on our rating system, and I mostly enjoyed it. I found the dialogue mostly enjoyable, and it didn't feel awkward or even too dated, despite it being a 51-year-old movie now at this point.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Crazy. The cast is pretty recognizable if you're a movie person, but not so much on the top level as much in sort of the middle. Like Ian McShane, for example, is probably best known by our generation for being in the John Wick films of all
Wrinkly
things.
faced man.
And yes, he's much younger here. And Raquel Welch, who is, I guess, more of a cultural icon than memorialized for her performances. But the cast does okay, in my opinion, and the plot is entertaining. At first, it made me appreciate Rian Johnson's films on Netflix, particularly Glass Onion, his most recent murder mystery.
Yeah.
A little less, especially at the outset, because there's all these people like getting on a boat and playing a game that some guy arbitrarily set up for them. But mostly I was just frustrated that I couldn't see the visuals better because I rented this in standard definition because that's all you can rent it in, as far as I know. And things were a little fuzzy, and I had trouble hearing. I put on the subtitles even to keep track of things. There are a few moments that kind of falter for me, and I don't think it's the best possible execution of this concept, but I was entertained, and especially in the second half, once we get past kind of the clunky exposition of learning who all the people are, I was definitely intrigued and at least wanting to know what had happened. So 3 out of 5, and we'll dig into some of the iffy parts, I guess, in a minute.
Yeah, I guess so. I think, I don't want to jump the gun on anybody else's thoughts, but I think looking at Letterboxd, we might have all given this a 3 out of 5. I also gave it a 3. But for me, I think I liked the actual story a little bit more than you did, Christian, because the 3 for me was purely due to the stylistic and visual elements, because it's a pretty plain looking movie. There's a few neat shots, like during the intro, I particularly liked jumping right into spoilers, although this isn't really a spoiler. It's kind of the inciting incident. Sheila is killed at the beginning, the titular Sheila, unless you consider the titular Sheila to be the boat. But she's killed in a hit and run, and then the car kind of reverses, and we see the reflection of her body in the fender.
That was such a Zach moment.
I thought that was a very neat shot.
that.
That is a Zach moment. But other than that, the direction's very plain. But I thought as a mystery, this was really terrifically put together. A whodunit is a very tricky genre because I think it's mysteries and whodunits are kind of the only sort of film where everything hinges on a certain piece of information, which the audience has to feel a very particular way about. Because if they figure it out too early, if it's too easy, there's still things to be invested there in like the performance and the action, but there is a level of excitement and mystery that's totally lost if the audience figures it out. I think Alfred Hitchcock once said that whodunits were his least favorite kind of film, and he talked about a historical example where when he was a kid, there were like two rival radio stations, and one night one was going to play a whodunit, and the other station, like a couple hours earlier, went, if anyone's going to tune in to this program in a few hours, the butler did it. And that meant that for a bunch of people, they were like, okay, well, I guess I'll watch the other station. And I do think, I thought I had this figured out, but it really pulled the wool over my eyes. It has some really effective red herrings. I really like the setup. The twists and turns totally got me. I did not expect kind of he's not really the antagonist, but kind of our victim, the game player of the film. I did not expect him to exit the frame as early as he did. And it really did grip me. And I really liked the conclusion. I think the final kind of gag, the final twist at the very, very end isn't quite as effective as I think it could be. But overall, I had a lot of fun with it. And I do think the comparisons to like Knives Out and Glass Onion are certainly appropriate. I think Rian Johnson even said that he likes The Last of Sheila, and that was an influence on both of those.
Makes sense.
So back in the day, when you were able to pick up books in elementary school that were completely random, and there's like a million Bunnicula books, and there's like a million Diary of the Wimpy Kid books and Captain Underpants. And amongst all those, I liked Encyclopedia Brown. I liked Encyclopedia Brown and the occasional Agatha Christie, if my reading comprehension could handle it right. So I am familiar with whodunits and mysteries. Columbo, I like watching occasionally when it randomly comes on a random channel that you find on whatever. And yeah, I do like whodunits, but I think in this case the playfulness got to me a little bit, and the plainness of the framing actually became an issue for me. And I think it's just because like Zach mentioned in his review that it's like an elderly person's show. Like everything is being shown to you the way that it is, and it's plain, and that's fine. Like it's totally fine. There wasn't anything I was confused about, which is good. And I didn't feel like the story was explained to me. It was definitely unraveled in a very effective and gripping way. I agree with that. But I felt like there's a lot of overuse of the same kind of going back to that same monastery over and over again. And maybe a little bit there's too much overzealousness, I don't know, of going through that scene and kind of everything hinging on the what's it called? The confession booths. And I like that there's a twist to it, like a visual twist, but I feel like it's a little bit on the cheaper side, just kind of showing it was, I don't know. I'm trying to say like it's manipulating the scene in a good way, but also I felt like it's an easy way to get away with like, oh, well, there's just another person in the booth, or like actually he got stabbed and he was dead. And it's just like, they could just keep infinitely adding new things. Like, and there's just like another person in the corner, like giggling the whole time. And you wouldn't know because we didn't see it in the flashback scene, that kind of thing. It's sparse enough, but I feel like the plot really hinges on a lot of that. And the red herrings kind of hinge on that too. So that was a little bit bothersome for me. And the playfulness, I think we'll get into later, but just the general tone of the film and the way the characters interacted was very awkward sometimes. And that could be a product of the time period, but I also think it's just the acting too, and maybe a little bit of the screenplay. But other than that, I thought the acting was pretty solid overall. Very believable characters. I was invested in basically all of them. They all had something interesting or intriguing about them. It wasn't like, oh, they're really good people, but they're actually bad or something. And I really liked the perspective that it was just a game and that this like didn't define their whole personalities or anything, except the child molester. But everything, pretty much everything else. Not to let the cat out of the bag, but
Yeah, the little child molester.
Yeah.
the little one. Yeah, God forbid it was big, but yeah, 3 out of 5 for me.
Oh God.
Okay. I think I also kind of hover between like a 3.5. I didn't actually give it a rating on Letterboxd. I didn't want to spoil it for Christian because he's the only one that follows me. I thought watching this movie and kind of being transported in that world was almost like playing like a fun board game. I think that was really fun for me, kind of like being there as they unraveled it too. I was like, oh, cool. Like we're just going to keep moving and everybody's kind of participating in this like it's a game, even though like some of the characters started to know things at different stages than others. I think there were some like moments that I did not understand, like why it was happening or what was going on. And I actually had to go back and like rewatch the ending because I think I was confused. I think there was a lot of moments throughout the movie that I was grateful that there was a lot of time and a lot of information that came after it, because I was like, oh, shoot, like, who is that? Like, what's their profession? Like, why does that matter right now? And at the end, that wasn't as clear to me. So I had to go back and be like, okay, like, this is how I need to interpret these people's words and what's actually happening. I don't know. I thought it was fun. I think another thing was like the last, I guess, third of the movie when Tom goes back to the boat and they have like a whole nother uncovering scene. I was like, wait, this movie is like still going. I thought that we like figured it out. So I think at that point I was like, oh, like what's happening? And then I kind of got back into it. So I was glad for like the momentum that happened after that. But I kind of thought things were resolved and then they weren't resolved anymore. So maybe that's like, I don't know. But yeah, I feel like those are like my preliminary thoughts.
I do think, Mitchell, you made mention of you felt like they went back to the confessional a little too much. And I do think that it does feel like a bit of a missed opportunity that they set up this idea of like, we're going to make, I forget how many of them there are, like 5 or 6 of them. I think there's 6 of them. We're going to make these 6 stops. And at each of these stops, you have to like find a clue. And I maybe would have liked it if even after Clinton died, they had to like continue to play the game to figure out the mystery. I think that could have been fun because I did like the idea of kind of that framing device. But I do think that the way that they did keep going back to the confessional, I did like the way that they did that, because they never, like, the movie never lied to us necessarily. It just didn't show us certain things. And in a few cases, it did show us things which I thought were like continuity mistakes or just weird decisions. And then at the conclusion, they were revealed to be significant. And I love when a mystery does that. I think a great example is when like after the wife of the lead thinks that she's killed Clinton, they establish that she drags him outside and then smashes his head with a bit of the pillar. And when they find his body, there's part of the base of the pillar on his head. And they make a special mention of that. And then in the flashback, she uses a bit of the top of the pillar. And I thought, oh, okay, well, they used like the wrong bit of the pillar in the flashback, which would not be massively unusual. Like continuity mistakes like that do happen. And then at the end, they revealed that was all deliberate, and it came back to be significant. And I loved that, including like the little child molester thing, where I was like, they even point out like, oh, not a big child molester, and that ends up being significant. Those little details were things that really made me enjoy the mystery a lot.
I was trying to be in my like Batman detective mode of like hyper over analyzing every moment, but I totally missed the column detail in the flashback. Like it never even occurred to me that she was using or had to use a certain type of rock. And I do think sort of piggybacking off of what Mitchell said about how it feels like they could just add people to the room or keep extrapolating that. I do feel like it's a very fine line Zach, your argument is persuasive to me. Before I heard you say that, I would have sided more with Mitchell in terms of the whole like rewind the clock and see things as the director wants you to see them. But given that more of it is based around a detail that they intentionally include or exclude, I'm willing to accept that. I think what I'm less willing to accept is how the characters respond to information as they receive it, specifically when people start to confess their sins or I don't know. Apparently, child molesting and shoplifting is in the same category. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
That is weird. Yeah. And I do think it's significant or at least interesting that he's the only one, James Mason, who it's suggested is the little child molester. He never like admits to it. He's the only one where that's like the only card left on the table. So I guess that's got to be him, but he never gives us any details. And I also, the minute that card was on the table as somebody actually did this, I knew it was going to be him. Because when he's introduced, he's directing kids on set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, other details that I loved. I love details.
I definitely think just how meaningless the game kind of was, and like the actual purpose behind the game was very apparent, and that's good and bad. I guess it's good because it focuses the plot a little bit more. It makes it much more impactful that we know from pretty much the very get-go that it's about Sheila, and it's about finding out who killed Sheila and then finding out who killed Clinton. And I think it's bad because they put so much time towards it. I guess a lot of the film they spent quite a long time kind of going back to these cards when they don't really, like, we don't really know the origin of them. We don't really know like how he found out all of them are, like, I guess they all know each other, so I guess that's kind of like the passive excuse. But like why is it shoplifter and why are they all like massively different things? It just doesn't matter. And it's just like, are we supposed to feel any sort of way towards them because of this? Like, I don't really give a shit if she says shoplifter. Like, I'd be honest with you. Like, it's just, it's especially with regard to the fact that somebody died. Now, what's her name? That was mentioning like somebody's been murdered. Like, why are we, like passing this off? But she says that like a couple times, and then they kind of just go back to being like playful about stuff and pretending nothing's happening. And I do want to supplement something else that Zach had mentioned earlier about like them continuing with going on with the game. Like, why would they not go on with the game? And it brought up a very interesting point where like physical location is a pretty significant part of a whodunit, and being able to basically physically entrap all of the people is pretty much the only convincing way that you can keep every single person like completely engaged in the game. And I thought there wasn't really a lot of persuasion here. I mean, they kind of just felt like, oh, this will be fun, and then they just kept doing it like dumb teenagers in a cabin in a horror movie. Like, it's just, they just keep engaging with it for some reason, even though they know it's meaningless. And they get away from that later. So I give some credit back. Like, it does end up coming away from the game, but like for some reason, like they had to have some reason he had to go back on the yacht. Freaking Lolita guy, and he just like they had to have some reason. Well, I'm just, because I paid to be on a yacht and I don't have any money. It's like,
well, I think I don't have any money is a fair enough reason. I can't
is,
pay for a hotel. My bed is here.
I mean, I know, but the whole the whole point.
Yeah.
The whole point is to keep the story going. In the yacht,
sure.
You know what I mean? Like, everybody was gonna leave. It wasn't gonna happen anymore. But it's clever, but it's a little bit hokey, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. There's a couple different ways to watch this, I think. From what Zach has said, I think he was trying to piece it together as he went. But I want to ask all of you, were you letting the information sort of wash over you, or were you actively trying to solve it yourself? And as a cousin to this question, did the characters feel real to you, and did you care about them? You could feel free to play with either one of those, but Orly, especially since you're bringing a new perspective to us today, were you sort of actively trying to solve it, or did you just kind of sit back and let it come to you as it happened?
I don't think that I like have the capability to solve it. And so there were a lot of moments that I was like, oh, like, especially like the column thing. I was like, dang. And then there was one moment where I was really wondering like where the crumpling of the card would come back, because I knew that was significant immediately, but I could not figure out like why and how. And I think like, I don't know if this is like a legitimate thing, but I think that everybody's profession being something different within the acting world, like gives them relatability, but also I feel like distances me from them, like potentially as characters, because like, and I think too, like the interweaving of the characters, like eventually when we find out about like affairs and when we see affairs throughout like the whole thing, like I think the initial pairing that we kind of come to understand and the initial roles that these people play in their individual lives, like they're like convoluted really quickly. Like they don't stick to like quote unquote who they are, which I think makes the movie more interesting, but also kind of the movie departs from like, I don't know, like the basis of who these people are and like how we're supposed to see them pretty quickly. And so that kind of leaves. So that's not like exactly an answer, but I don't think I found as much like relatability and connection to the characters because of those things.
No, I think that's a great answer. And I already mentioned this to some extent, but that exposition block and borrowing Mitchell's Agatha Christie illusion again, there's always this like first few chapters, especially with, and then there were none. I don't know if Zach and Orly, if you had to read that in school, but Mitchell and I did.
That's a classic.
Yeah.
But I remember the first few chapters being like, this person is on the train to the island and this is what they're doing. They're writing about their innermost thoughts, or they just finished this business thing on this other place. And so much of that just goes right over my head because I don't think I have the capacity to track all of it. And the card crumpling thing too was something I'd completely forgotten by the time it came back around. So even these occupations were not something I necessarily cared to listen to, even though they became relevant. I was just honestly kind of waiting for the mystery to start, but I don't know how you guys felt.
I do think mysteries and whodunits are a little different in regard to at least how I look to relate to characters as well. Because for me, a whodunit is, and I don't necessarily go into a movie thinking I need to find somebody to relate to and like. I go into a movie and I have a protagonist and I'm like, all right, we're with this guy. Whether or not they're a good or bad person, because sometimes they are a bad person, but you've just got to think through their values. But in a whodunit, I think the joy is less having a single perspective and more seeing like ants in an ant farm and the way that they relate to each other and solve problems and work things out. And so for me, despite the fact that by the end, I don't think we really are meant to like any of the characters, that almost made things more interesting because treachery adds additional layers to the mystery and to the whodunit. This reminded me in a few places of another great mystery with lots of twists, Death Trap by Sidney Lumet. I think I like that movie more than this one, but still, that's a movie where by the end you have totally different perspectives on every character than you did at the beginning. And I think that's not quite the same case here, but definitely I think for James Mason, and I think Richard Benjamin is the star. I know his face and I know him from stuff like Westworld, but I don't know him from a ton more than that or have much of an impression of him. But I do think there's definitely, kind of in the way that movies like Knives Out and Glass Onion rely on your impressions of these performers to maybe pull a fast one on you and go, these are not the people you might have expected based on these performers you like. I think this movie does a very similar thing, but for a 70s crowd.
Yeah. I was passively watching this. I was soaking in all the information, collecting information and making it into intelligence. And but I wasn't writing anything down, so I'm going to forget about 2/3 of what I was thinking by the end of the movie. That's a really great That's really great insight you mentioned, Zach, because I was perfectly comfortable not having any changed perspectives of them the whole time. I was perfectly fine with just accepting that this is like an experiment. And you're probably gonna hate me for this freaking comparison, but it's like M. Night Shyamalan. Okay, I'm sorry.
Which one?
But well, I was thinking like The Village, really.
Oh,
It's
okay.
like The Village a lot. But anyway, yeah. So I just it's an experiment, and like just seeing how things go makes it the most fun. I think it really is not the type of film you're supposed to necessarily investigate, because there are some bits and pieces that you can put together. Like, I'm not going to read the screenplay and try to freaking figure it out just from reading it and like going through all that. That's terrible. But I will say that I don't think the film was intended to be something that, okay, can the viewer figure it out before the characters do type thing. I don't think if that was an intent, it was definitely like a tertiary, like one of the last intents, because this was more of like a fun 70s thrill ride mystery adventure.
Yeah,
So.
I don't necessarily think you're meant to be able to figure it out before the characters do, but I do think you're meant to feel like maybe you could, because there's some whodunits where, like at the end, like I feel this way a lot about a lot of Hercule Poirot stories by Agatha Christie, where at the end Poirot will pull out some like tiny piece of knowledge that no one could possibly know, and you're like, well, how did you even notice that? Like, I saw one once where, like, he at the end went, and I noticed when you wrote the letter, the microscopic tremble of your wrist indicates that you're an opioid addict, which means that you do this and that. And I think I don't like those kinds of mysteries, because I do think every piece of evidence that's used at the end should be at least presented to the viewer, so they feel like they had the tools to figure it out, which I do think this movie does.
I was just scrolling through the crew to confirm to myself if this movie had a score, because I watched this yesterday, so not long ago, but I'm already very disconnected from it. I don't know if that's a slight on it or not. I also watched Mad Max Fury Road today, so that might be why my brain is just completely scrambled. But there is a composer listed under crew, so there must have been a score. Also,
a Bette Midler
interestingly,
song.
yes, and Joel Schumacher did the costume design for this movie, apparently.
Wow,
so that's funny to
crazy.
those Batman and Robin fans out there. But I wanted to ask Orly, because you are quite a talented musician yourself. If you took note of the score, I feel like maybe we've had passing conversations about like listening to film score when we're studying, or maybe I'm misremembering or projecting a different conversation with a different person. But did you notice the score, and did you have any impression of it?
So I think there was one specific moment that I noticed. I can't remember where it was, but there was a moment where like the classic like horror mystery like high creepy notes started to play, and I was like, that's the first time that that's happened, and lots of mystery and scary have been going on thus far. But otherwise, like, I think I thought about it, and I think also like it escaped me. Like, there was no music that like left a lasting impression on me that wasn't like transition music, or like that just kind of was there. That was like it. I don't really have many productive thoughts about that.
No, fair enough. I honestly couldn't remember. That's why I had to ask. And maybe stranger, given that Sondheim co-wrote this, and he's such a musical person himself. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have too much more specific things, but I think I wanted to specify a couple more things that bugged me. Hate to end on a bad note, but I think, like Zach, I thought I had it figured out, specifically when, what's her name? Lee. When I guess Tom is sort of going around the room and assessing everyone's alibi as to who killed Clinton, it became pretty clear to me that it was Lee, and I thought, oh, this is going to be a really short movie. And of course, that's undone later to pretty good effect. That's not what bothered me. What bothered me is that after Lee has this like big emotional admitting to not just killing Clinton, or at least thinking she killed Clinton, but admitting to the hit and run of Sheila, And everybody around the room seems maybe a little bit surprised at first. And I don't know, maybe this is because they all have their own sins or things they have to atone for. But after she reveals that she, in essence, killed 2 people, everyone around the room doesn't seem all that upset about it.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't seem that fearful of her, especially, which I think would be a reasonable reaction, because she kills Clinton because Clinton's taunting her with the knowledge that she killed Sheila. So even if she's sort of emotionally apologetic about it, I feel like fear would be a reasonable reaction, or at least like disgust or a more of like a moral apprehension for what she did. Instead, what happens is Tom like comforts her and she says, I want to be alone, and everybody lets her go be alone, as opposed to like detaining her or at least keeping track of her in any way, shape, or form. I think that's what bugged me the most.
I think.
Go ahead, Zach.
Oh, sorry, Mitchell. I did not get the impression that she was saying she killed Clinton on purpose. I do think if she said, and so I killed him, I do think that some reaction would be warranted there. But my impression was that she was just trying to get into the booth, and she picks this thing up to break through the window, and it goes through farther than she thought it would and stabs him in the face. And she thinks, oh no, I've killed him. So I saw that more as everyone kind of being unsure of how to react to this confession of manslaughter than like people having no reaction at all to a confession of deliberate murder.
Also, with how much investigating they were doing and how into trying to deduce literally they were talking about theorizing the whole time, they did also have the evidence of the freaking body that they could go back to, that they just left there. Right.
Well, I think the police took possession of the body, probably.
They said it was taken 6 hours. They could have freaking gone back.
There's
if it was
also
that big of
line
a deal.
About reporting the death, and then one of them's like, in a town with 2 cafes and one something or other. So I think it's implied that, I don't know if they reported Clinton to the authorities or not. I'm not sure.
Well, we see the police.
They didn't even check his pulse, I don't think. Like it would have taken like 2 seconds for them to figure out that he didn't get bashed in the face or anything, that it was clearly an ice pick. And it was still in him, right? Like, wasn't it? Or no, he took it out. He took it out.
When he falls out, he takes it out of the back, which I'm not sure how that gravity weight, I'm not sure that would work.
I wouldn't worry about that. We'll leave that one to the wolves. But
yeah, when they say they're not going to report it, I think they're talking about like the island. Like there's nobody on that specific island. But I think when they eventually call the police in, they like radio whatever the port is that they just left.
I have faith in the Italian authorities that they can figure out how to get to the island.
Yes, I have faith they have boats.
Mm-hmm.
Another musical thing that I can't decide if it bothered me or not, so I'll ask all 3 of you. The thing with the tapes, where I guess all of them were meant to be Clinton's voice recorded in the monastery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I couldn't decide whether it should be obvious that one of them... Oh, gosh, but he's not singing, is he? No, this is a moot question. Because he's just waiting in the booth. He's not actually...
Yes, he is. Yeah.
There's a recording in that room, too. Okay, well, never mind.
Which, yeah, I guess now that that's brought up, I feel like we're definitely getting into the weeds here. But apparently, the reason this was written by Anthony Perkins and Stephen Sondheim is they used to throw... I did some research on this movie, and apparently they used to throw parties like this for their friends in New York, where they would set up like a huge mystery like this across like 5 or 6 different apartments and hotel rooms around the city, and everybody had to run around and solve it. And Herbert Ross, the director, was apparently one of those friends and said, you should write this as a movie. And I do think for 2 guys who apparently did this multiple times and impressed their friends a lot with the different stations that they wrote, the second like the monastery, the set piece where the murder happens, the actual like mystery and thing that the guests are meant to solve there is pretty lackluster. Like the first night where they've got to find a hotel based on a key and go up to the room and find the body. And I thought this is going to be great. They're going to do this like 5 more times. And then the second stop, the last time we see something like that, it's just find the tape recorders and I will be at one of them. Like it's so much less interesting and impressive compared to that first stop, which I mean, the real intrigue comes with the murder there. So it's a minor complaint, but still, I was a little disappointed that was it.
Yeah. Well, I think we're winding down. We all said 3 or 3-ish out of 5. We can do a round of final thoughts, I guess. I don't have much else to say. I just think, James Mason, gosh. I mean, the only thing I recognize him from was Kubrick's Lolita, and so he just gives me the heebie-jeebies. But 3 out of 5. I thought it was entertaining. I looked it up after the fact, and there is a Blu-ray of this out there.
Nice.
So it's a shame that this isn't available to rent in high HD. I'm assuming you all. Well, let's go in a circle. I rented this on Amazon in standard. I'm guessing all of you rented from there or elsewhere in standard definition, but just to confirm.
I rented it on YouTube, and it was 480p. Yes.
I rented on Amazon as well, and it probably wasn't much better. It didn't bug me that much because throughout pretty much all of middle school,
Suspiria.
I watched nothing but like classic Doctor Who on VHS. So, you know.
Yeah, well, you're desensitized.
worse.
You know
Yeah.
this.
We don't. Yeah.
I was
You can watch
born in the
Pixels.
darkness. You merely adopted it. The only thing that bugged me was there are some like shadowy scenes where the compression of the shadows is really rough and gets really crunchy, especially the opening scene where Sheila leaves the party at night. I thought, oh dear, like, because there were so many artifacts on the screen. I thought this is going to be rough, but it's mostly like a sunny at sea movie, so it wasn't too bad.
Yeah. Did you get it on Amazon, Orly?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Well, oh well.
Something I did want to... I know, Christian, you said that you thought Lee did it. Mitchell, Orly, did you guys at any point have like a pet suspect who was different from Lee, or did we all think it was Lee?
I think at one point I thought like Philip did something. I just didn't know what. Like he was like a little bit suspicious to me the whole time. And then I think immediately too when Alice like sat out of the first round, I was like, there's something suspicious about this too. And I guess the biggest thing that I didn't understand in the movie was those clips of Alice talking directly to the camera. I think I still don't understand what that was.
Mm-hmm.
But
so I think
that confused me too.
She would have been talking
to who sorry, Zach, who she was cheating with at the time. So Tom, right?
Is Tom Richard Benjamin?
Yes.
Yeah. So I because later they established that he's the homosexual. He has the homosexual card. So I think that would have been him. But yeah, that is something that's not like revealed later. They just kind of leave that hanging.
We didn't even mention the homosexual thing. That was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
It was played well. I think it was played well. The first half, I was like, all right, this better go somewhere. Like, whatever, the 70s or whatever, right? But I was hoping it was going to play into something else, or he's not actually gay. And the adultery thing was a very neat twist for that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was Lee as well.
Oh, I thought it was Lee. Yeah.
After James Coburn Clinton is killed, which I think James Coburn is great in this. He's very charismatic. He's a great character. I think you love to hate. I thought it was a shame to see him go. I was like, oh no, I loved seeing him.
That was sad.
But I thought I paused it after he died, and I went and did something else. And while I was like, all right, I'm thinking about this during like the 10 minutes. I think I like did the dishes or something. And during that time, I thought, aha, it was Lee, because at the beginning they established that Clinton has bought the option on Tom's screenplay, Freak Show, I think, which is meant to be this big blockbuster thing that's going to blow up, but he's done like nothing with it. And so they can't make the money off of that. And I thought, aha, Lee killed him so that the rights would revert to them and they could sell the script and make a bunch of money because they're in hard times. And I thought I was so clever. And then in about 20 minutes, when Lee says, "I did it, guys," I thought, uh-oh, that was too quick. It was not Lee.
She's got an estate.
I was close. I was surprised they never mentioned the option on Freak Show, though. Like, that's totally a red herring thing and never comes back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, if nothing else, I'm glad that I picked a movie that Zach seems to have enjoyed more than me, because that never happens.
It's pretty rare, yeah. And vice versa, I think. I don't know if I've ever... maybe Curse of Frankenstein. I think you liked it a bit more than I did, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Shall we interrogate Zach in the form of the rundown?
Yeah, he's not running away. He's gonna get hit by my drunk driving because I am consuming alcohol at the moment. But
so Mitchell is Lee. I'll be anyone but Philip. Okay, so how this works, we've kind of skated over the intro for this a lot lately because we assume all of our listeners are repeat listeners, which they probably are. But in the event that we have magically harnessed some new listeners, perhaps those that want to listen to Orly's charismatic takes, the rundown is a 1-minute segment wherein we throw a bunch of phrases and lines and jokes and miscellaneous topics from the movie we've just discussed, and Zach has to give it a gut reaction rating out of 5. And we go down as many things on the list as we can in the space of 60 seconds. And when the 60 seconds are up, we have to stop because that's the nature of the rundown. So with a guest here today, we are going to go... What order are we going to go in? Yes. Okay, it'll be Mitchell goes first, then I read one, then Orly reads one. Mitchell, Christian, Orly, repeat.
Thank you.
Down the list. We all have the same
I'm
list.
ready.
Okay. And we're going to start in 3, 2, 1, go.
A piece of dreck.
3 out of 5.
Going on vacation like normal people.
3 out of 5.
Strange vibes.
4 out of 5.
What is this, a pogrom?
2 out of 5.
James Coburn's sinister grin.
Oh, 5 out of 5.
Oh, sorry. Ian McShane Puppet Hour.
3 out of 5.
Making the movie.
4 out of 5.
Fox and Paramount are interested.
3 out of 5.
Going home.
3 out of 5.
Suspecting the homosexual.
2 out of 5.
Ketchup's beginning to attract silverfish.
4 out of 5.
Everyone's just admitting everything.
3 out of 5.
James Mason being that guy.
4 out of 5.
What are we, some kind of the last of Sheila?
2 out of 5.
The ice pick, a classic woman's weapon.
3 out of 5.
This is the director's cut.
4 out of 5.
Making up for the 25 minutes spent on your back last night.
3 out of 5.
A mouth so dry that you could film Lawrence of Arabia in it.
4 out of 5.
All rather like
1
a Hammer
second.
film.
2 out of 5.
Time!
Nice.
Oh, we have some really good ones left over.
There are some very good singers in this film.
That's
There
a
are some
shame.
very good one-liners.
The dialogue is great. Yeah. I think it's weird that they call an ice pick a classic women's weapon, though. Because typically, like usually in recorded murders, more often than not, women poison people because they're smart and they realize that if they stab or bludgeon somebody with a weapon that they leave their fingerprints on, it'll probably be found. But yeah, so that was interesting.
Yeah, I don't know where that sentiment came from either. Well, thank you so much, Orly, for joining us. This was very fun.
Thank you.
Before we say goodbye, is there anything you want to plug or anything you want to mention? I know I want to say thank you for having me as a guest on your radio show at Kenyon last year. That was great fun. I don't know if there's a similar thing going on now, but maybe just your Letterboxd or your socials or nothing at all.
Oh, sure. You can follow me on Letterboxd if you want. It's at Orly B. Also, my other plug is that I'm working at a place called Caramore this summer. It's a performing arts festival in Katona, New York, and there are so many awesome ensembles, singers, all kinds of musicians coming for various concerts every day of the week, or not every day of the week, but all different days of the week throughout the summer. So if you're in the greater New York area, I highly recommend going. It's going to be really fun.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That sounds fun.
Epic.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for joining us. And who's picking our next film? I don't remember. I never
Mitchell.
remember.
Mitchell's picking it. Mitchell is picking it. Are you ready for Duck Soup? Duck Soup? The Marx Brothers I don't know anything. I
I'm
told my
pretty
dad
psyched
about
for
it.
this.
My dad was like, "This is funny as heck. You guys are really gonna enjoy this." Like, I don't know how you saw this movie, but we're gonna watch it. It's very short. It's like probably my shortest movie I've ever done, because usually I choose like a 3-hour war movie, and everybody disagrees with me. But yeah, it's gonna be amazing. Finally, a good old comedy. Definitely out of character for me.
I watched this on a DVD I got through the mail like 6 years ago, and the last 10 minutes were so scratched up I couldn't watch them.
Oh,
So
no.
I'll be intrigued to see how this movie actually ends.
I added this movie to my watch list about a year ago when a fellow Kenyan college singer that I had a crush on said it was one of her favorite movies. So there you go.
Wowzers.
Maybe Orly will guess who that is, or maybe not. Hopefully not. Okay. Anyway, this has been Cookie Pocket. Thanks, Orly. Thanks for listening. See you next time.